Hey, Alysa, how are you?
Hi, good to see you.
Good to see you too. It's been a while.
Nothing's happened in privacy since we last spoke.
Yeah, I know, right? So we should just shut this down. Um, hey, I want to ask you about a couple things. One about publishers and privacy. I was at the Villa Tech NYC Navigator conference last week. We talked about that. So I wanted to get your perspective. But firstly, the Washington AG put out an FAQ on My Health, My Data. I was curious what you saw in there.
Yeah, that was big news. It made some rumblings throughout the industry because for all the kind of the compliance work that is focused on My Health, My Data, the challenge is always when you get to the product level, right? If you have purchase data, you're going product by product. And if you think about what are some of the most frequently purchased products, it's pain relievers, right? Over the counter Advil and Tylenol and Zert allergy, Zyrtec. And under the definition, if you're just tracking the language, I think many of us interpreted that by the letter, that was included. And so what Washington Attorney General's office put out was an FAQ, right? They've had a number of FAQs so far, that said, so long as you are not drawing an inference about a person's health status, then the purchase of over-the-counter medications is not on its own consumer health data. And that's huge.
So is that just a labeling exercise on the segment? So for example, all right, here's my segment of frequent Tylenol buyers. As long as it's just that, I'm okay. But if I say, hey, it's headache sufferers, I'm in trouble. Like, is it that simple?
Well, I look at it as a totality of the facts, right? You'd have to defend that it's not an inference. And so if it's a wink wink, but really it's a
Yeah.
profile and a use case that is all about a health status, then that that I think is going to be harder to defend. But you start with certainly the label of the audience, but how are you using it? And you can think about the public policy reasons, such as if I buy Advil a lot or it's cold season and I often buy these, I want to get the coupon because I previously purchased it, right? That I get that again. And so I don't view that as an invasion of my privacy. And I think it's just having a reasonable interpretation of where does the letter of the law end, and a reasonable good use case that's not in scope can be interpreted. Now, I think it's important to note this is an FAQ, right? So it is the Attorney General's interpretation. We still have a private right of action. What I think as a just very pragmatic standpoint is that we haven't seen a flood of lawsuits, right? They haven't been filed yet. We haven't seen demand letters. And so when plaintiffs firms eventually do get around to looking for examples to go after, I think it makes it less of a low-hanging fruit type issue. There's other issues that I think are more directly down the line that they would focus on first, and that will inform obviously risk mitigation strategies. But I think it's a very positive move by the AG's office.
Gotcha. It takes out that kind of super easy stuff. So for example, what starts to matter? Like if you are combining segments together, Tylenol purchases plus something else that kind of looks like, all right, it kind of looks like you have diabetes or some like specific health issue. That starts to get closer to, all right, you've made an influence. What about if because a common thing for consumer goods companies to do is to look at high volume and low volume purchases and or lapsed buyers.
Right.
What if there's something in the messaging then, like in the actual advertisement itself, that just lists a symptom of Tylenol, like you have headaches, like you probably want this.
Well,
Does that then qualify as an inference?
so
Good.
the reason why I said totality of the facts matters because it's not just the label, it's right. What are the attributes? How do we build that model to create the label? How are we using it? Right. And that's where the advertising does go into, you have to take it into account. Now, a lot of publishers, for example, the level of review of each individual's advertising content, that has to be scalable and reasonable. But I think it goes into what are the policies by the publisher for advertising when it comes to sensitive personal information, right? That there are a lot of other scaffolding from a compliance standpoint that you could do to help mitigate that risk.
And is the obligation on the publisher or on the brand who's doing the advertising?
Well, it's the sensitive personal information. Who is using sensitive personal information? And both have responsibilities there, depending on, is the brand bringing the data, using the data, and the publisher is just getting an ID without any sense of that, or does the publisher, based on purchase data, it is really the controller of the kind of information being used to create the audience? So that matters.
Gotcha. Oh, interesting. That's going to be good to watch. On publishers, so last week I was at this conference, ton of publishers there, and publishers haven't exactly like capitalized on some of the big changes that have happened in the world, right? Like the move from print to digital kind of missed a ton of revenue there. And I'm saying this, I love publishers, right? And like our whole future of democracy pins on that, so I want them to win. The mobile thing, they didn't kind of really win there either. And then of course, all the advertising dollars going to Google and Facebook and others. So now we're sitting here like, okay, we're talking about privacy, and like, we think privacy is bad for business because it reduces our available ad inventory. Somebody said at this conference last week. And one of the things they pointed to was, publishers are lobbying to dilute these privacy laws. And I just had this feeling that that's not the right approach. That, because everything we talk about is if you embrace trust, if you embrace trust and transparency and control for consumers, they're going to give you more data. They understand the value exchange. They're going to give you better data, I think. And then we're seeing this convergence of preferences and privacy, where you imagine a world where you're like navigating the New York Times or something, and you get to blue shirts, and you're like, you know what, I kind of like blue shirts, and you have my permission to market to me about that. And if I trusted a publisher that much, I would do it. And I just feel like that's the winning game. But I'm wondering if this one person's thought was something that everybody's thinking, and wants to know what you thought of that.
I just think we're in such an interesting time where the business culture and mentality, like who sees the opportunity, who sees the downside, because it's not a flash in the pan. Like this is the direction we are moving in. So either you deny it and stick your head in the sand and just say, I'm going to squeeze out as much as I can get, or this is where it's going. How do I make the most of it? And that means investment, right? To get more sticky, loyal customers who want to see, you have to offer value. And certainly in the journalism context, like you have to offer value, that somebody wants to provide that information to you and want something that is more personalized, and be not rely on kind of legal to solve the obligations there, but lean into it. How do you make that so user-friendly where the consumer wants to customize a profile, right? Wants to tell you the kind of advertisements they would like to see because they get value out of that, and have that be a very user-friendly experience as opposed to a legal compliance way to handle. And I'm seeing that now. Like you can see those who are really trying to do that. I was at an ad tech economics conference in New York a couple of weeks ago, and it was really interesting. There's very few lawyers. It was all the business side, but they're looking at where the money is and trust, consumer trust, and how do you actually lean in and not run from privacy. I was like, of course, total nerd. I was so excited. I was like giddy hearing this from business people, but I am hearing it more and more, and some are really kind of looking at that with open eyes. And that's interesting.
Awesome. Oh, that's good to hear. We've talked for decades about this move from push-based advertising to pull-based advertising, where consumers just tell you what they want. And this feels like the closest we've ever been to that, with a privacy model.
Right. Well, personalization is the buzzword among first-party data business teams. What does that mean? It means like a much deeper relationship with the consumer based on what the consumer knows and wants, right? There's engagement around that personalization. So how do you do that? I think that's really the question.
Yeah. Thanks, Alysa. I had a feeling you'd have a good answer for that. One more thing in the few seconds we have left. Where are you on the Drake and Kendrick Lamar beef? Have you picked a side?
Oh, that is not only a hot topic, but a very political one. I'm going to exit to my left without commenting there.
All right, probably a smart move. Hey, good to see you.
Good to see you.
Okay, bye.